Fishing to me is more than just a hobby, it's a way of life that brings tranquility, excitement and a deep connection with nature. As the seasons change, each month brings its own unique challenges and rewards. Here I recount my fishing adventures throughout the year, capturing the essence of each trip. I only fly fish this year, but I like game, course and sea fishing as the mood takes. It was not a year of catching much, the highlight being my first salmon on a fly in October on the Ribble. But the year did deliver. My spey casting and general casting refined further, and I learnt a lot technically. All the fish were safely returned with a minimum or no handling at all, to recover in the net in the water and swim away in their own time. The video is meant for me as a record, and I realise it's of little interest to non-fishers, but if you do watch, I hope you like the scenery and experiences. First day of 2024 was early spring on the 5th of March on the lower Hodder. No fish showing, but lots of small greyish flies with a tail. I assume they were blue-winged dollies, but unsure. Did hook a fish after an hour, but lost it, then it felt like a grayling. Quite ring-rusty first time out with the casting and my general organisation. Day 2 was on the 2nd of May on the Loon at Low Gill. Fished from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. The river was low with very slippery, slimy rocks. Note my lazy sideways casting. In the next trip this will be eliminated. I told you this was a learning year. So one decent trout swirl on Middleton Dub, and also a big splosh on fast water on Shingle Pool that could have been an early sea trout. 2 RAF Typhoon jets came screaming over so low I nearly jumped out of my skin. Wow! Trip 3 and 4, 12th, 13th of May, 2 days on the Cumbrian Derwent in a lovely part of the world, miles from anywhere. If you needed tranquility, this was it. The 12th, the first day, was a group Paul Proctor Masterclass Day. Paul is a fishing guide and national game in game fishing and a regular contributor to Trout and Salmon magazine. Paul put me right on my awful lazy sideways cast, which is now banished into history. The first day, though, was really nice and the flies were hatching profusely, and I caught one small trout, saw a salmon jump, and there were plenty of salmon par, which are known as smolts in the river. There's good fly hatches, stone flies coming down, particularly yellow sallies, and this winter I've tied a few of these for 2025. Stayed overnight in Cockermouth, sampled a real ale and had a curry. Nice town, I really liked it. The following day, trip 4, I'm now on my Jack Jones, but it was a bit grim with a cloud and a nasty wind which put the hatches down. I lost a small brown, but then I caught a nice roach, at least a pound, maybe more. This is a game river and coarse fish are completely untouched as far as I'm aware. It would be really nice coming here in winter for the roach with stick float tactics. I had to move several times due to catching salmon par. Salmon par are baby salmon, and they need to be left alone because you just be catch one after the other. They're in shoals and ferocious feeders, they'll eat anything, so it's just better to move on when you come across a group of them. Day 5, 18th of May. Trip 5 of the season, and here I am on a lovely warm May evening on my favourite river in all the world, the Loon. This was one of those nights that linger in the memory. I hooked and lost a few trout early on, prospecting with Euro nymphs. However, brown trout wise, the river was quiet on the surface. There were sea trout though, splashing regularly, and clearly many of them had come in from Morecambe Bay recently. Then an amazing sight, a sea trout pod came through almost at my feet in inches of water, with the backs out of the water moving into the next pool, so the shallow water separating. Unlike salmon, sea trout can move upstream in any conditions, even very low water conditions. Just after 9 p.m, a guy called Frank arrived and we had a good chat. Frank explained he fishes for the brown trout well into dark, and no doubt he picks a few sea trout too. The little bugs and critters, the fly life, only live one day. They die at dusk and fall onto the river surface, where they're called spinners. At this point the river is alive with trout swirling on the surface after the bounty. The vortex on the water on some of the swirls indicate they are big fellows. There's some huge trout in the Loon, there's no doubt about that. I had an hour's drive back, and so I left at 10 p.m, waving to Frank on the way back to the car. Frank no doubt had a great night as the fish were going daft. Trip number 6, 25th of May, back in the River Loon. It's windy and colder than last week. The river, some water in the river is about 18 inches above summer level. Looks a great height for fishing the double-hander for salmon. However, given there's a good number of sea trout in the river, and given I've had success in the past with daytime sea trout on higher water, I took a single-hander and with an intermediate line, and I used a small size 14 silver stoat. Success there came none. Trip number 7, 30th of May. 5 days later I'm back on the Loon, this time turned up for unicorns, otherwise known as salmon. Back in the day the rivers were full of salmon, which was good. What was bad was fishing for them was largely for the connected and the well-off. The rivers now have few salmon. What is good though is the ordinary person can now get on these beats, which were once exclusive. What's bad, of course, is the decline of the salmon as a species due to various reasons, but salmon farming and overfishing at sea are a big part. By law, now in almost all British rivers, salmon must be safely returned to the river. Today the average person can fish for them. Yes, it's not cheap, but no more than the average carp syndicate. And the money you pay goes into preserving the salmon's habitat and spawning areas and research into their decline. Lecture over. Did I catch a salmon? No, I didn't. Trip 8, 4th of June. 4 days later it's trip 8, and this time on the River Hodder. I said at the intro this was a learning year. This day was bright sunshine and 0.4 river height on the online river gauge. These smaller rivers really need a bit of water, otherwise a trout can see you a mile off. Our resolve to look at this was around 0.6 on the gauge in future. I was fishing for trout, which led me a merry dance, a few rising late on, but I screwed up here with my planning. Still, what a lovely place to fail at. Trip 9, 10th of June, back at the River Loon again. Rain and wind on arrival, but the wind dropped and the rain ceased since, and after that it was a really lovely evening. Theoretically fishing for salmon, but really to develop the spey casting, which had varied from excellent to disastrous. Had a lesson from Jim at Fern earlier in the week, and Jim recommended practicing on grass at home, so let's see the result of that. Obviously caught nothing and no sea trout jumping this week, but a good fly hatch and plenty of brown trout rising. Trip 10, 13th of June, River Loon again. Foul evening, high north wind and lashing rain. There was a shy horse on the lane to the river. It was a friendly chap, and we eventually came to an arrangement. No sign of any salmon or sea trout, but some big brownies taking surface fly on the tail of the church pool. My casting single spey and spiral snake roll coming on nicely. Must keep up practice on the field back home. Trip 11, 17th of June, this time the River Ribble on the middle to upper river. A nice sunny day, it was 0.8 on the online gauge. I thought the switch rod would be better on a smaller river, but with the water height, bringing a slightly heavier double hander would have been more appropriate. Moment of excitement as a pull and a big fish shot off down the river. Got it to the net, but it was a big brownie that slipped the hook right at the net. Maybe 3 poundish, I'm not sure. Some big splashing, so salmon and sea trout were about for sure. Trip 12th, 23rd of June, back at the River Loon. Sunday morning session from the first light to midday. It started cloudy with an upstream wind and drizzle, but bright and warming up later. No joy, but saw a few splashing and got one on the GoPro, probably a salmon I reckon. See the top left on this film by the trees on the far bank, which is where the salmon lie on this pool. Trip 13, 3rd of July, back at the River Loon again. Bit of a disaster day. Left my eye protection glasses at home and misjudged the weather. It was freezing even with my Sims jacket on. The river was high, well over the grass of the hut pool. I must have been out of my mind to set out from Newton. There was an upstream gale. The weather forecast back home said it was moderate, but it was a gale. Stayed for an hour and a half, but increasingly became clear as the wind got fiercer. Without glasses, I was taking a big risk with no protective glasses in these conditions. I could have managed without protective glasses on a calm day, but in these conditions it was plain stupid. So I went home. The only bright spot, a big salmon jumped clear of the water in the middle of the pool right next to me. Trip 14, 15th of July, and we crossed swords with the loon again. Nice water, a good height for the fly and a good chance of a salmon. That's as far as it went. Keep trying though. Trip 15, 18th of July, Loon again, first light to midday. Cracking day, but marred by losing my Sims carbon wading staff, which has served me well. Lost it in the long pool. Took my wading jacket off because it was hot and unhitched it for a minute and the river took it. Never mind, more expense. Plenty of migratory splashing though early on in the church pool, and was identified at least 3 as salmon. Salmon also jumping in the bridge pool. Trip 16, 25th of July. We're at the Loon again. 2 members were fishing the church pool, so I tried upstream. Nothing doing, saw no salmon, but plenty of finnick in the top pool. Finnick are small sea trout and is the Lancashire name for them. Fishing will only commence when these fine ladies had crossed the river in their own time. Trip 17, 28th of August, this time on the River Ribble. The river was 83 on the online gauge. This level was perfect for the salmon on fly at this beat. Met a guy called Alec in the car park. He'd had nothing. I tried my luck in the usual pools, no takes and seen nothing, but a lovely evening on the Ribble once the early monsoon had passed. Trip 18 on the 30th of August, back at the River Loon. Started at first light. The river was a nice height and it looked very promising, but nothing happening. A club member arrived after I'd had about 2 hours on the church pool, so I'll let him take over. Fish farm pool and the Stones pool, a roe deer spotted, a few trout rising in the farm pool, and I thought a big splash might have been a salmon. The long pool below farm was unfishable due to height, but would have been ideal from the Arcombe side. When I got back, the club member informed me 2 otters had been seen porpoising around the pool, so no wonder I'd had nothing earlier. Osprey in the tree in the field to the left of church pool early on. Ever since the 1980s, watching on TV Jack Charlton and others fishing the great limestone lakes of Ireland, I've always wanted to fish Loch Corrib. And in September 2024, I got the chance to enjoy 2 days on the loch. Corrib is a mecca for trout anglers, and people come from all over the world to fish it. The trout are as wild as the wind and are huge, the record being 21.5 pound. However, 2 to 3 pound fish are common. The lake is 42,000 acres, 27 miles long and 10 miles wide. You cannot practically bank fish because of the wild terrain, and so you must fish from a boat. If you're not experienced, it's dangerous, and so you need a boatman and guide. Aside from the safety aspects of basically an inland sea, you need expert knowledge just to find the fish. I had 2 days with Kevin Malloy as a guide, and we got on great, and I can thoroughly recommend Kevin. As always, with my luck, I picked the 2 days when conditions were poor, and even Kevin only managed one fish. That's my excuse anyway. The tradition on Corrib is lunch on one of the 360 islands, some of which are inhabited. Tea or coffee is served with a traditional Kelly kettle, heated over a little fire made with twigs. On my fishing season, the 2 days on Corrib were day 19 and 20, on the 19th and 21st of September. Kevin said the best time is April or late April, when buzzards, olives and mayfly are all hatching. Trout activities are all dependent on fly hatches. Sadly, hatches were poor on both days I went. On the first day it was sunny and flat calm. The next day was a good chop, but a cold north wind which stopped the hatch. This lovely brown trout was the only catch of the 2 days and was safely returned. By the way, if you think you can navigate Corrib without an experienced boatman, check the conditions on day 2. Trip 21, 8th of October, River Loon. Accident on the M6 shortened planned session. There was a leveret hiding in the grass stump on the way to the river. Car park for the club at Caton was packed, which is a good sign. Fished entirely the hook pool, seen salmon jump 4 to 5 times in the centre of hook pool and by the trees at the far side at the tail of pool. Caught nothing, but the river has a lot of salmon at the moment. Trip 22, 10th of October, on the River Loon again. The river was 92 at the online gauge at Caton, but was a lovely height at Arkholme, probably because Arkholme is upstream of the River Wenning. Hook were to believed to be a salmon on the first hour on a 1-inch brass tube fly on Church Pool, only on for a few seconds. Then I tried long pool and recommendations that salmon were holding there. That day will come one day. Trip 23 on Sunday the 13th of October was to be my last fishing trip of 2024. For a multiplicity of reasons, I was not able to get out the rest of the year. The year had focused primarily on salmon, as always, and was a hard slog fishing with interminable blank trips, which in truth were the established expectation. I arrived at the River Ribble on the 13th at first light. I love nature and was delighted to be joined by a wild buck roe deer. Seen them many times, and they normally smell, see or hear you well before you see them, and they're gone before you get anywhere near them. But this guy stayed put, ran away almost when you were within feet of him, but then returned, stood behind me and stared at me. I felt quite self-conscious, if I'm honest. No one likes being stared at. Then a strange thing happened. Was this a sign the salmon gods had briefly relented? It might have been my imagination, but I thought I could hear a soft voice calling me. Maybe it was the deer, or maybe it was the wind whistling through the leaves on the trees. Peter, fish the wood pool. Fish the wood pool, Peter.
Yes!